Hey everyone, welcome to the Canine Culture Podcast, where we talk about everything dog. Q&As with veterinarian professionals, rescue operators, everyday topics. We cover everything dog on this podcast. So make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media on both Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for listening. Now here's that next episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Canine Culture Podcast. This is your host, Brittany, and today we are joined by Angie Winters. She is an author, and her recent book that is now out is called Don't Train Your Dog. So, Angie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, the story starts 28 years ago, and as when I first had my first touch of, I could always train dogs, and that stuff has come easy to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've trained dogs for television commercials, print ads and things like that. But I started delving into the rescue world when I was just volunteering for rescues. I wasn't with any certain rescues. I just helped. And then I started realizing that typical dog training, that everything that people were doing was not working for dogs. And just my experience with dogs, because I've worked with, 100 personally hands-on and 1,000 that I've reached out over the country through my videos and now hopefully the book. But without exception, typical training and the way that humans think about typical training does not fix dogs and necessarily teach them the family skills they need to stay in their homes, to have a happy and well-behaved life. So I started just out of desperation, bringing only the worst of the worst cases to my house. And then they'd already been through 2 or 3 trainers, through parents. They'd either been surrendered to shelters or vets for euthanasia because they just could not even be housed. So I was very aware that I was their last hope. And so I was actually, I've always tried to figure out cures for things and fixes for things. And so I became obsessed with finding out how these things are developing, how these behavioral problems, fear and aggression are developing, and how to actually fix them, not put some Band-Aid on it for a while and then you turn it over to the parent, and then a trainer leaves, and then it develops, and parents' hands are tied, and adoptions are not as successful as they should be. I mean, many times. So that was my first driving force, was to make adoption successful. And so every dog I worked with and every parent I worked with, it was. But then on the larger scale, I realized I can only help one dog at a time, and I've got to get this information to millions. So I had always knew I needed to do that. I started recording video and taking notes over these decades of every dog I helped, and then I actually had a severe health issue for about 5 years, and it's a long dramatic story, but I really came down to the last few hours of my life. Like I knew that it was over. But I've been doing all this work with dogs, but I had thought, I know what I'm doing here in my home, bringing all the different cases, whether it be fear, aggression, anything, feral dogs. I know what I'm doing in my home, and I need to figure out how to get that to parents and rescues. But I thought, it's just too hard. There's no way I can do it. I just didn't know I could do it. Well, then when I almost died, I was literally saved in a dramatic fashion in 24 hours. I was rushed to Pittsburgh, and I didn't do any of this. I was just carried to Pittsburgh, and I woke up cured after having brain surgery by doctors I had never even met before. I mean, I was completely cured and alive, which I did not expect to be, which was really bad because I had 2 young kids and I had my dog work, and but I knew I was only scratching the surface of an immense problem with dogs being surrendered to shelters and losing their homes and biting kids. And so then once I got a second chance at life, I knew why I was here, and that and that's when I started the obsession, which began in probably 2012 with making videos. I wrote articles, wrote scripts for videos, and then now the last 4 years it evolved into this book. So it's a mission for me. It's not something I can quit. So, there's been a lot of heartache and tears and exhaustion and spending money that you just don't have in order to continue on with this. So that's what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. So the book is finally arrived. The book took 4 years to write, and it's down to these very simple recipes and prescriptions that parents can use to teach good behavior or correct behavior that's gone off the rails.
Wow, that's amazing that you found your calling, and it's exciting too. It's
Mhm.
liberating to know like this is what I was here for. This is what I'm good at. I know I can empower others. So
Yes,
that's fantastic.
it was very dramatic. I mean, I've got some trauma and stuff I've had to work through. It was like a bomb went off when I didn't
Right.
expect to be alive. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden I was just saved by what I consider a miracle. I had no, I didn't have anything to do with it.
Mhm.
And um so then I realized that and it was a tough times, but now I feel like the luckiest person on the planet because I get to save dogs and I
Right.
and I know how to do it. But
Mhm.
now my mission is to spread the information because I can do it all day long. But if
Right.
it's got to be simple enough and work and it's common sense and fit into a family environment in order for it to work for parents. And that's what I feel I've achieved with this book.
Mhm. Now, is Don't Train Your Dog, is that your first book, or do you have any other books that you've written?
That's my first actual book. Yeah, I've written, for video scripts, and I've written for about traveling with dogs for a national magazine. Just things here and there as they've come up. But
Mhm.
this was my first, touch even into the publishing world. So I had to figure out the whole publishing world and writing
Right.
a book. And thankfully, we've gotten very good feedback from it. It's an easy read,
Okay.
and there's some humor, just like with parenting for kids. There's
Mhm.
some humor to it. We're not creating robots, but
Right.
we do have to, have safety rules that need to be, held to and held firm with. So I compare it to firm but supportive parenting for
Mhm.
kids. I do firm but supportive parenting for dogs. But there's a caveat there, and it truly is a parenting mindset, not a training a wild animal mindset or a domesticated animal mindset. And that changes the whole thing for you and changes it for your dog when you flip to this mindset. Um,
Mhm.
so, because my definition of parenting is providing love, support, and guidance to vulnerable members of a family. So I was like, yeah, I feel comfortable with saying I'm parenting the dogs because I am.
Right.
But where it can trip up and that people need to understand and what I write about in the book is that the way you parent and give that guidance to dogs is completely different than you give it to kids. They both
Mhm.
need it, but they can't understand it unless it's given to them in the way that they understand.
Right. But you've reframed it with respect to you're not training your dog, just like you don't train your children, you are just parenting them, which
Right.
is it's a very interesting, a different mindset. You don't normally hear people say it. You hear people joke like dog parent, dog mom, things like that.
Right. Right.
So I
Yeah.
like the way that you have reframed this because our dogs are a part of our family and they've got to learn those guidelines to kind of fit in and to understand the household rules. So,
Right, right.
yeah.
Like what I talk about in the book is it's like this is not a play on words. This is actually a different thing because people are like, "Oh, it's probably still training, but you're just saying that." Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I've been doing the same thing for 28 years, and now
Uh-huh.
society has gone this far with dog training where they realize it's not working.
Hmm.
Shelter surrenders are going up, dog bites are going up. I mean, exponentially. So now society has come around to where they're they're willing to be open to what I'm saying, and it isn't just a play on a popular term calling it parenting. It's very
Hmm.
different, and it's providing guidance. It's finding teaching moments
Right.
instead of doing tricks for treats. Like, they don't want to go in their crate just because you have them sit beside the crate. Then you have them perform a down beside the crate. That doesn't make them feel better about the crate. They're still about you. They know you want them to get into a crate that gets all that emotional entanglement. They know you want them to get into a crate, and you talk during
Hmm.
that time, and you do all these things. We do all these things wrong. So my systems really set it up till it's just giving parents the parameters to set it up, and then the dog. Once you set up the parameters, the dog chooses to go into the crate by itself and feels perfectly fine about it. I'm not saying begrudgingly gets in the crate and just sits there sometimes until then it starts getting worse and worse. I mean,
Right.
they actually love it.
Hmm.
So that's how different it is. It's working with the emotional entanglement between dogs and humans, not training tricks.
So let's talk about two aspects of this. Let's talk about how parenting your dog and maybe your child is similar. And then let's kind of talk a little bit about how they are different or the key difference.
Yes. So in the book, I actually give a chart, a very simplistic chart, but it hits home because it's like the reason why we're asking you to parent dogs differently or give them guidance differently is because they have to have things that are in the moment in order to understand. They have to have that pause where you get their eye connection about what you're saying, give it a second to sink in. And then they need to be provided with the alternative thing you want them to do with super high excitement and emotions on your face and in your voice. But people are bringing too much. They don't realize what looks they have on their face, and dogs are reading
Mhm.
your face every single second, like
Mhm.
micro things. So it's like understanding the overall concept of being emotionally neutral when you're giving guidance. Well, we can't do that. That's against the rules, safety rules. But here's what we can do. But it doesn't work like taking a distraction and saying, look over here when they're doing
Mhm.
that. They don't understand that's not allowed, that they're not
Mhm.
allowed to bite kids, or they're not allowed to run out the door. That's not taught with treats and distractions or with fear-based, strict obedience training. So
Mhm.
neither one of those work, and they both create, aggressive and fearful dogs. This middle parenting style, firm but supportive, creates happy and well-behaved dogs, and they have to be both. They can't be one
Mhm.
without the other. A happy dog, it has to be happy or it can't be well-behaved, and vice versa.
I've actually talked about that a few times in the past year on my podcast, getting more involved in rescue and working at the shelter, and then getting to behavioral rescues myself,
Mhm.
learning this idea of a dog cannot be happy unless they understand your expectations, unless you are consistent, unless
Right.
you really help them understand how they fit into your family. So if you just let your dog have a free for all, and sometimes they can chew on this, sometimes they can't, sometimes they get yelled at for this, sometimes they
Right.
don't. That's not a happy dog. It's usually an anxious dog. They have no idea what you're expecting. They
Right.
don't understand. They're like, well, I did it yesterday and it was fine.
Mhm.
So I think for me, learning that consistency, and just learning kind of, just always being thoughtful, even in the way that I speak to them in my tone, because even if I'm not angry at them, but I'm speaking in an angry tone because something that happened at work or
Right.
just generally in life. So that's been a pretty big lesson that I have learned working through this podcast with rescues, through
Yeah.
different trainers. And it's kind of crazy that that wasn't something I thought about 2 years ago. It never occurred to me until I
Right.
got challenged with these behavioral cases. And that's
Right.
when I had to shift my thinking around all of this.
Right. And now imagine being in my position and getting hundreds, working with hundreds. And then you start seeing the whole overall picture, and then you start developing, ways to be very consistent. But this don't train your dog, the guidance in there is so much easier than typical dog training. It's so
Mhm.
much easier than doing these repetitions of this. It actually is common sense. It fits within a family dynamic, whether you have 8 kids running around or it's just you and your dog as your family. It works in all situations, in all dogs, regardless of breed, sex, inherent wiring, past experiences. These recipes are easy to do. They're easy enough for parents to do. Step one, two, three, four, that's it, and then, but understanding how you're giving that guidance, like you were saying, it has to
Mhm.
be in the moment and has to be very black and white. And it needs to be firm, but firm does not mean any kind of anger or any kind of look on your face like that. They'll
Mhm.
read that and they can't cross over into the flight or fight, or they can't learn anything. So
Right.
really the concentration is on actually finding a teaching moment, giving the guidance in a way they understand, not like a kid understands, and not with treats and distractions, in a way they actually understand, and then providing the alternative. So that's where there's a gap missing, where people are saying, well, I only do all positive, and it's like, well, I everything I do with dogs is positive, but that all positive term is really a misnomer to me, because
Mhm.
when it starts going off the rails, which it will, because parents think, oh, look how smart he is, he's sitting for a treat, and then
Yeah.
they think they can teach him not to bite kids in the same way, and it's not done. It cannot happen. So
Mhm.
that's what I'm trying to get people to understand is those are very different things, and especially for a dog's mind. And the parenting techniques in this book are just so easy and common sense that people go, when people see it, they go, that's too simple, and that seems like magic.
Mhm.
They think it seems like magic because it happens fast.
Right.
Right? And so you don't get frustrated parents, you don't get dogs losing their homes, you don't get kids being bitten. Dogs are secure because when you're neutral, emotionally neutral. You give them black and white guidance at the moments when they're feeling things, not when their body's doing something and not when their body's looking at something, when they're feeling something, or or unsure of something. They lift a front paw, they're unsure of something, right
Mhm.
then give them the guidance, recognize that guidance moment, what I call the guidance moment, and then provide the guidance that they'll understand, and then the alternative, right? But it's like, I think one of the best ways to explain it, which I do in the book, is dogs are different to us. And, studies have proven that they are born looking to us for help, right? They can
Mhm.
read our eye movements, that's a valid study that's been done. Puppies, even, very young, can learn to do that. Not learn to do it. They're born doing it, looking to humans. So, like example, I say a cat doesn't look to us for help catching a mouse. It doesn't ask us to pull out the oven. Hey, can you pull this out so I can get the mouse? But the moment a tennis ball goes under the couch, the dog's looking at us like, "Help! Can you help me? Like, help me,
Mhm.
mom!" And
Yeah.
and then like we run and we know what they're asking us. So I'm saying that right there is your clue to the entanglement, right? So
Mhm.
this is using that entanglement to teach.
Mhm. Would you say that your book is suitable for a first-time dog owner, a someone who's just rescuing a dog, or even someone who's kind of at the I don't wanna say their wits end, but at the kind of the end, "My dog
Absolutely,
keeps acting out, doing this." Do you think your book is suitable for all of those,
all of
audiences?
all of
Okay.
them. The only thing that it doesn't do, and I talk about this in the introduction, is I'm not training dogs for search and rescue.
Right.
I'm not memorizing the 360 breeds and who won best in show at the dog show. It's none of that stuff. People who work with dogs, it seems like people they think you're in that one box, that people who work with dogs, that these things, but it's
Right.
very highly specialized, really. And so I specialize in the way dogs feel and view their environment. So the way, how they fit into a family structure, how to communicate with them, how to, make them be happy and well behaved.
Mhm.
That's exclusively what I do. But that spans a large range of dogs, whether you're in rescue, right? Because I've touched in all those areas. I
Right.
have vast experience in all those areas. That's why how I was able to finally see the big picture, because most people have a more limited experience, or they're just in training, or they're just in rescue, or they just, you
Mhm.
know, I've seen it all because I've been doing it for so many years and I've been obsessed with it.
Mhm.
So when you start seeing that big picture, you're like, oh, I see. This is, um, we have never, as a society, put so much emphasis on our relationships with our dogs. We love them. We put money into them. We pay for training. We, we put effort into it.
Mhm.
But yet the behavior cases are getting worse.
Yeah.
So that why? Why? It's because the information you have is not what you need for a safe and happy family life.
Mhm.
Dog training just does not do that.
And I think a lot of people now who are getting dogs, they see a dog on TV, or, they remember a dog from childhood, and they just assume that the dog's going to be perfect. Whatever perfect means, it's different for all of
Right,
us, but they have this
right,
expectation that this dog's going to come home and be perfect. So, working in rescue, I've seen dogs come back within 1 day, 2 days, because they peed in the house, because they snapped at another dog. And so
right,
people are truly just it's like they're not setting themselves up for success, they aren't equipping themselves with the tools to really make these relationships work.
right. I agree. And I say that, so that is it in some of the cases. They're not putting the effort. But I also have seen this so long with so many parents, that I know many parents who have tried everything, and they're trying, oh, they said I should do this obedience training, or they said I should do all positive.
Mhm.
And they get stuck in this paralysis of,
Yeah.
so you don't move. And this paralysis is, our dogs are paying a brutal price for this, right? And
Mhm.
so even on the cases where many people try, and they try hard, they absolutely lose hope because they cannot find the information that's in this book.
Mhm.
So this is why I've had to, I have to be direct about dog training, which, dog trainers don't like. But I
Mhm.
mean, I'm here to save dogs, and I'm here to help parents. And so I cannot pretend like something works when it doesn't. And that mentality, and telling people that it ties their hands, they lose hope, and that's when the dog loses its home. And then when it
Mhm.
comes back to a rescue, now it's labeled a biter. It has further separation anxiety, whatever. Instead of bringing it in with an adoption program I have over a weekend, you're set by Monday. That bond happens. You're set by Monday. That the dog understands the family safety rules by the end of those 3 days. That's how fast they can do it. So
Mhm.
you doing repetitions of 25 repetitions of something and you're seeing no change, that's your clue that that's not the right information. Because you
Mm-hmm.
know how smart dogs are, and you know how
Right.
intertwined with us, and you know how much they want to please us.
Mm-hmm.
So when you give them what they need, they learn fast, and things change fast. So I mean, a dog could be biting kids and be separated in a room and everything, and you work this kind kids and confident canines recipe I have, and it'll change in that half hour.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not over exaggerating it.
So in addition to the book, is there anything else you can think of for any listeners who are getting their first dog, whether it be, from a breeder or a rescue, whatever it is, but are there any other key pieces of this puzzle to making sure that people are setting themselves up for success?
I really do feel like that book is very comprehensive, and it's got,
Mm-hmm.
it's got 28 years of, now you can't cover every tiny situation, but it covers a lot. I mean, basically everything you need, whether it be puppy all the way through. Now I do have a separate, called Welcome Weekend that when parents bring them in, especially from a rescue, they need to work this recipe, but the techniques that are endowed in that recipe also mainly exist in that book too. So
Mm-hmm.
the Welcome Weekend is just a more concise package where you could watch it, so the book I'm not sure another book does this yet, but it has a digital companion on our website, Parenting for Dogs, and it goes by chapter, so that when you see one of the recipes and you're like, okay, yeah, okay, I get that, but I'd like to see that in real life, or I'd like to see her doing that in real life. Then you
Mm-hmm.
can just go to the digital companion and watch me doing it on video and see for
Oh,
your own
great.
self.
Yeah, that's
And it's
awesome.
got downloadables there where you can download the recipes, download your own potty schedule, hang it on the refrigerator. So the information is always with you. But it really is easy. It's just very different from what people are used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So they got to like remind themselves a little bit of it. Way easier though than dog training. But yeah, so that digital companion is another thing, and then the separate programs. I also have one, and this is in the works. It'll be out within a week or so, which is my Healing Broken Spirits program, and that's mainly would be for rescues or a parent who happens to get hold of a feral dog or a
Mm-hmm.
dog that's come in from a puppy mill that can't be touched by humans yet.
Yeah.
You have to do this 3 to 5 day program before you work the things in the book. But other
Okay.
than feral dogs or dogs that can't be touched by humans, everything in that book will work for all dogs, regardless of age or past experience. And it's a fantasy story when people say you can get a certain breed of dog and it's never going to bite kids, because that's just a fantasy story.
Right.
That's not
Right.
where that lives in.
Yeah.
It lives in the information that's in that book, that being able to guide them into feeling good about being around kids, and that they know there's no aggression allowed and they don't have to worry about it. And then when all that relief is taken off of them, that's when you see their real personalities. That's when you see the
Mm-hmm.
happiness, when they strut around with confidence because they know exactly what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Concentrate on 5 big things and forget all the little stuff, the important safety things, and forget all the little stuff. My dogs are great and I have them have great behavior, but I don't create robots.
Right.
I'm not looking for an immediate down, whatever. I'm just listening to you. Listen to me. Don't do that dangerous thing, or we don't do that here in our family. That's all I'm about. I'm not putting on a show for showing a dog doing a command and laying down in a field for 5 minutes. I can do that, but I
Mm-hmm.
won't. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do that because it serves no purpose.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
In my world, it serves no purpose for parents.
yeah. So where can people find your website? Make sure you give us your website, and then also the book.
Yes, it's parentingfordogs.com with the number 4, Parenting for Dogs. On Facebook, we're still Angie for Dogs at this point, but they're tied together. And the book is on Amazon, or you can go to the website and it'll give you a link to it to buy it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Angie. We really appreciate it. And any listeners who are tuning into this episode, make sure you check out the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Canine Culture Podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media. If you have any recommendations, any topics that you'd like to hear, if you know of any guests that would be good for the show, or if you yourself want to be a guest, please reach out to us. Send us an email at canineculturepodcast@gmail.com, or send us a direct message on social media. Thank you for listening, and please share this with any of your dog-loving friends.